essentially, I'm trying to talk about something that's very, very academic and quite intense, but I'm trying to do it in a way that's accessible to more people, just so you understand like the basics of what I'm talking about here. So anyway, this term psy-omatics I've come up with, it's nothing necessarily new. It's been worked on in various different ways before. However, what I've noticed of late is that a lot of people attribute meaning making basically to psychological work, and that's particularly so much today in terms of kind of digital communications and those kind of things. It's all about the mind, right? We're focusing on the mind a lot, and my argument is actually no. Meaning making comes from an interplay between the mind, the body, and the environment, which I call psy-omatics, right? Which is psychology and somatic study, which is mind and body, basically. Okay, so let me just get into this blog here. Introducing the psy-omatics of presentation. When people ask me what psy-omatics actually means, I often say it's about how thinking and sensing happen together in the body, in a place, at a moment. It's not just about ideas in the head, but the messy, alive relationship between the environment, mind, body, and language. In a post titled Introducing the Psy-omatics of Encounter, I outline how I make sense of the physical and conceptual things that I meet. Here, I want to outline how I articulate these encounters or turn them into communicative events, what I call the psy-omatics of presentation. Just going to interject there. When I say the psy-omatics of presentation, it means when I present something that I've thought. And that could be in whatever medium. It could be a word, it could be a picture or a sign or a symbol or a song. It could be a lyrical poem, whatever it is. However I make that, I'm presenting it to either somebody else or to something else, which is even more creepy or weird to think of if you think about it. Anyway, back to the blog. Any kind of meaningful presentation, whether it's writing, speaking, poetry, performance, or teaching, requires preparation. Not just mental preparation, but physical preparation too. Over the years, I've learned that if I want to present lyrical ideas clearly, my body has to be ready to carry them. That means fitness, breath, posture, voice, and attention. I don't just think the words, I feel them moving through me. I project them, shape them. And I think that's worth really bearing in mind there. Yes, I'm talking about lyrical poetry production in my thesis, but that opens out into many things. It goes beyond literary theory. We're not just talking about nice words or poems, right? When we're talking about, well, exactly how do you make meaning in your body or your being or your mind or whatever, and then project that or present that to somebody else. That's actually a very sophisticated process that's happening, and it takes into account things like the mind, the body, the language, and the environment. All right? Anyway, back to my blog. This approach borrows from many places. From poetry, I take Charles Olson's idea that language carries energy from the writer to the reader, or, in my case, from the presenter to the listener. I've interpreted that energy somatically. It's not an abstract force floating around. It's something felt in muscle tension, rhythm, breath, and timing. From performance theory, I've been influenced by Eugenio Barber's idea of the dilated body, where trained physical awareness creates a bridge between action and thought. What interests me here is intuition, not as something vague, but as a form of embodied thinking. And I just want to interject there. When we're talking about meaning making and understanding our environment and all these sort of cognitive processes, we almost invariably think about them in terms of psychology. And that's because predominantly I would say psychology or the study of the mind has dominated the 20th century, right? So we automatically think of kind of cognitive processes happening in your mind. But something like intuition troubles that, right? And something like instinct troubles that, because these are not led by the mind, right? These are things that come from the body and sort of inform the mind. So hence I argue that meaning making doesn't just come from the mind, it comes from an interplay between the mind and the body. When I start to depart from some of these traditions is in how I understand the environment. I don't experience the world as pure flow, constant movement, or total immersion. Instead, I encounter both flows and substances. Some things move and change, others resist, hold still, and demand attention. When I'm presenting, I'm negotiating both. Sometimes I need motion and momentum. Sometimes I need stillness, pauses, and silence to let meaning settle. This is where psy-omatics differs from approaches like Sandra Reeves' ecosomatics, which often emphasize continuous movement and full integration with the environment. My relationship to a site, whether that's a landscape, a room, or a digital space, is never complete or seamless. There is always a part of me, psychologically and somatically, that does not dissolve into the environment. Language itself creates distance. To name something is already to step back from it. That distance isn't a failure, it's necessary for thought. So a lot to unpack there. Basically, I'm stepping into various different academic discourses that have been around for a long time. I am not the first person to have these kind of discussions or this way of thinking. And it's basically how you perceive or what your theory of the world or the environment or the universe is really helps you understand it and therefore make meaning from it, right? So if you believe, like, say, the Taoists, right, that everything is Tao, it's all flow, right? It's all the way. Everything is just like a constant flow. Well, then how you respond to that and make meaning from that perception you have, you are articulating a universe of flows, right? And something like Tai Chi, which I've looked at before, which is, again, it has a psychomatic element to it. It's basically like a philosophy in motion, right? That's what Tai Chi is. And it's basically like you're meditating and moving through Tao. So you're moving energy around you and you're moving with the energy, right? Now, that's great, but I'm suggesting, well, what if, I don't encounter anything on my expeditions that tells me that we live in a universe purely of energy and flow. I encounter substances, right? I encounter entities, objects with their own motivations. And this is where it gets into some sort of heavy philosophy. I'm not suggesting that the human subject is like a privileged entity, right? That comes from Graham Harman's object-oriented ontology, right? I'm not suggesting that what we call in academic terms anthropocentric, meaning I'm not saying that the human is center to all things, right? What I'm suggesting is that things encounter us and they don't know everything about us, right? We hold our secrets, but also so does everything else, right? I meet a magpie on the coastal path. I'm never going to know absolutely everything about that magpie. Even if I shoot it and dissect it, I don't know everything there is to know about it, right? There's something in it that will always elude my understanding of it. Now, in some ways, that can be quite terrifying. Mark Fisher talks about the eerie as though it's being haunted by kind of failed utopian projects as well. He gets into some very interesting terrain. To be honest, I'm not scared of this, right? I think that that's actually inspiring, and it inspires inquiry, meaning I want to find out about the world around me precisely because I don't know everything about the things around me, all right? Okay, so that's kind of a brief kind of outline of where I'm at. Again, there's a lot of really dense theory in here. I do go into it in more detail in my thesis, but let's get back to the blog to kind of simplify this. For many reasons, I've become wary of using the word performance. It often carries theatrical expectations that can obscure what I'm really trying to do. I'm not interested in spectacle, although I understand the mechanics of smoke and mirrors. I'm interested in clarity, sincerity, and inquiry. The Psy-omatics of presentation is about finding ways to present lyrical thinking through speaking, making, and doing that respect the tensions between body and mind, movement and stillness, nearness and distance. Okay, just to interject there, there's the word performance is quite loaded. So quite often people hear performance and they just think theatrical performance, right? No, I would argue I'm leaning more towards the interpretation of to perform a task, as in to do something, right, as well, because that to do something is a performance in a sense. And so once you start thinking about, well, how do I express or articulate my relation to the universe to somebody else, or not just the universe, sorry, the world in which we find ourselves, how do I articulate that to something else? Well, that in a sense is you are performing a task. So I'm not necessarily interested in invoking the mystery side of performance, right? The smoke and mirrors, the ritual aspect, right? I'm not interested in diversionary tactics because I think there's been way too much of that. And I argue in my thesis that the priestly classes are experts at this, and they use these performances, these smoke and mirrors, to distract people, to delude people, right? And I don't want to do that. And I don't think we have to do it. If you think about what technology is, you spend all of your days tethered to a screen. That's not opening up the world to you. That's closing down the world to you, I argue, because you are not aware of your environment or your surroundings. If you are sitting in a chair playing computer games all day and all night, all fair play to you. I have no judgment to you. If you want to do that, fine. But you have to understand that your attention is being drawn out of the surroundings around you into a digital space, right? And that is a performance. It is a show. It is a magic trick. It is smoke and mirrors. It is stealing your attention from what is really happening all around you. Anyway, in the end, Psy-omatics is not a method to copy. It's a way of paying attention. Each project, each presentation has to find its own form. Or, as I put it in the thesis, it has to be done in a way better described not as performance, but as gruthil, a making through doing, grounded in the lived encounter between self, world, and language. As always, miathkar. Now, I put a link to some of the people's work that I've referenced down below, and I hope that kind of starts you thinking about what Psy-omatics actually is and why it's important and why it gets into terrains outside of literary theory, right? We're going beyond literature terms here. We're going beyond the ideas of kind of utopia, dystopia, mesotopia, the ideas of performance or theatre or all those things. And we're starting to actually see how these techniques or these strategies actually inform how you interact with the world around you and understand the world around you. And I think there's been a huge push to take you out of your bodies, right? But also to distract your attention with whatever flashing light is or whatever the latest thing is. And what I'm suggesting is, in order to resist some of the more contentious, some of the more harmful, there's a good word, impositions on your psyche, is to understand that you can avoid that by getting into your body and knowing exactly precisely where your environment is and what is happening. And I think that then moves this idea of meaning making through poetry, through literary fields, out into the wider cultural, sociological, and environmental discourses. So, I put links into the sources down below. And I'm thinking next week I'm probably going to talk about kind of technocracy again, because I've been really going into a lot of that kind of thinking. I hope you have a really wonderful week, and please leave a comment below if you found some of this interesting. By all means, challenge some of the things I say. I'd really like to have some sort of interesting conversations. I'm not suggesting that everything that I'm finding or coming up with here is necessarily 100% correct. And I would really welcome some kind of discussion, really, about some of these ideas. Anyway, see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Miafka. Bye-bye.